The Grand Inquisitor is one of the most famous passages in literature, and certainly the most famous chapter in the Brothers Karamazov, and for very, very good reason. The Grand Inquisitor is this prose poem that Ivan Karamazov has written and tells Alyosha when they meet in the tavern as a way for Ivan to convey to Alyosha his thoughts and philosophy and his feelings on Christianity and faith and morality and nature of God and evil. And leading up to the Grand Inquisitor, we already have a speech from Ivan that where he narrows down his argument and uses the unjust cruelty towards children in the world as the main argument for how he struggles with understanding the love of Christ and the divine justice of God. Um, the Grand Inquisitor is the story of the second coming of Christ and how he would be received. Ivan sets the story in the 15th, 16th century in Spain, where you had the Inquisitions led by the church, burning people alive and so on. And the story opens with the second coming of Christ. Christ reemerges. He wanders around. He does not speak. People recognize him. A grieving mother with a dead child falls on her feet, asks Jesus to resurrect her child. He does, and everyone rejoices. But the Grand Inquisitor walks out of his church and arrests Jesus. He takes him prisoner. He puts him into a cell, and the Grand Inquisitor comes to speak with him. And I'll read you some of this. The Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus in the cell, "The dread and intelligent spirit, the spirit of self-destruction and non-being," the old man goes on, "the great spirit spoke with you in the wilderness, and it has been passed on to us in books that he supposedly tempted you." This is a reference to the Gospel of Luke and the three temptations of Christ. Did he really? And was it possible to say anything more true than what he proclaimed to you in his three questions, which you rejected, and which the books refer to as temptations? And at the same time, if ever a real thundering miracle was performed on earth, it was on that day, the day of those three temptations. The miracle lay precisely in the appearance of those three questions. If it were possible to imagine, just as a trial and an example, that those three questions of the dread spirit had been lost from the books without a trace, and it was necessary that they be restored, thought up and invented anew, to be put back into the books, and to that end all the wise men on earth, rulers, high priests, scholars, philosophers, poets, were brought together and given this task to think up, to invent three questions, such as would not only correspond to the scale of the event, but moreover would express in three words, in three human phrases only, the entire future history of the world and mankind. Do you think that all the combined wisdom of the world, do you think that all the combined wisdom of the earth could think up anything faintly resembling in force and depth those three questions that were actually presented to you by the powerful and intelligent spirit in the wilderness? This is how Dostoevsky refers to Satan in this story of the Grand Inquisitor. He does not call Jesus Jesus neither. He does not refer to the devil as the devil, but it's very clear that this is what he is talking about. By the questions alone, simply by the miracle of their appearance, one can see that one is dealing with a mind not human and transient, but eternal and absolute. For in these three questions, all of subsequent human history is, as if brought together into a single whole and foretold. Three images are revealed that will take in all the insoluble historical contradictions of human nature over all the earth. This could not have been seen so well at the time, for the future was unknown. But now that 15 centuries have gone by, we can see that in these three questions, everything was so precisely divined and foretold, and has proved so completely true that to add to them or subtract anything from them is impossible. Decide yourself who was right, you or the one who questioned you then. So already here, Dostoevsky is moving into dangerous, blasphemous territory. Recall the first question. Its meaning, though not literally, was this. You want to go into the world and you're going empty-handed, with some promise of freedom, which they, in their simplicity and innate lawlessness, cannot even comprehend, which they dread and fear. For nothing has ever been more insufferable for man and for human society than freedom. But do you see these stones in this bare, scorching desert? Turn them into bread, and mankind will run after you like sheep, grateful and obedient, though eternally trembling, lest you withdraw your hand and your loaves cease for them. There's a retelling of the first of the temptations of Christ by the devil. But you did not want to deprive man of freedom and rejected the offer. For what sort of freedom is it, you reasoned, if obedience is bought with loaves of bread? You objected that man does not live by bread alone. But do you know that in the name of this very earthly bread, the spirit of the earth will rise against you and fight with you and defeat you, and everyone will follow him, exclaiming, who can compare to this beast? For he has given us fire from heaven. Do you know that centuries will pass, and mankind will proclaim with the mouth of its wisdom and science that there is no crime, and therefore no sin, but only hungry men? So Dostoevsky refers to the current state of Russia, the rise of socialism, the rise of nihilism in Western Europe, the teachings of Nietzsche, everything like that. The whole teachings of Nietzsche is quite embodied to some extent in Ivan Karamazov himself. He goes on, feed them first, then ask virtue of them. That is what they will write on the banner they raise against you, and by which your temple will be destroyed. In place of your temple, a new edifice will be raised. The terrible Tower of Babel will be raised again. And though, like the former one, this one will not be completed either, still you could have avoided this new tower and shortened people's suffering by 1,000 years, for it is to us they will come after suffering for 1,000 years with their tower. They will seek us out again, underground, in catacombs, hiding, for again we shall be persecuted and tortured. They will find us and cry out, feed us, for those who promised us fire from heaven did not give it. And then we shall finish building their tower, for only he who feeds them will finish it, and only we shall feed them in your name, for we shall lie that it is in your name. It's again fairly blasphemous. This is a Grand Inquisitor, representative of the church. Oh, never, never will they feed themselves without us. No science will give them bread as long as they remain free, but in the end they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, better that you enslave us, but feed us. They will finally understand that freedom and earthly bread, in plenty for everyone, are inconceivable together, for never, never will they be able to share among themselves. They will also be convinced that they are forever incapable of being free, because they are feeble, depraved, non-entities and rebels. You promised them heavenly bread, but I repeat again, can it compare with earthly bread in the eyes of the weak, eternally depraved and eternally ignoble human race? And if in the name of heavenly bread, thousands and tens of thousands will follow you, what will become of the millions and tens of thousands of millions of creatures who will not be strong enough to forego earthly bread for the sake of the heavenly? Is it that only the tens of thousands of the great and strong are dear to you, and the remaining millions, numerous as the sands of the sea, weak but loving you, should serve only as material for the great and the strong? No, the weak too are dear to us. They are depraved and rebels, but in the end it is they who will become obedient. They will marvel at us and look upon us as gods, because we, standing at their head, have agreed to suffer freedom and to rule over them. So terrible will it become for them in the end to be free. But we shall say that we are obedient to you and rule in your name. We shall deceive them again, for this time we shall not allow you to come to us. This deceit will constitute our suffering, for we shall have to lie. This is what this first question in the wilderness meant, and this is what you rejected in the name of freedom, which you placed above everything. And yet this question contains the great mystery of the world. Have you accepted the loaves? You would have answered the universal and everlasting anguish of man as an individual being, and the whole of mankind together, namely, before whom shall I bow down? There is no more ceaseless or tormenting care for man, as long as he remains free, than to find someone to bow down to as soon as possible. But man seeks to bow down before that which is indisputable, so indisputable that all men at once would agree to the universal worship of it. For the care of these pitiful creatures is not just to find something before which I or some other man can bow down, but to find something that everyone else will have to believe in and bow down to. For it must needs be all together, and this need for communality of worship is the chief torment of each man individually and of mankind as a whole, from the beginning of the ages. In the course of universal worship, they have destroyed each other with the sword. They've made gods and called upon each other. Abandon your gods and come and worship ours. Otherwise, death to you and your gods. And so it will be until the end of the world. Even when all gods have disappeared from the earth, they will still fall down before idols. You knew, you could not but know, the essential mystery of human nature, but you rejected the only absolute banner which was offered to you to make all men bow down to you indisputably, the banner of earthly bread, and you rejected it in the name of freedom and heavenly bread. So here, the Grand Inquisitor essentially says that by rejecting the temptation of the devil for Jesus to assume absolute power, he has created a vacuum for someone else to proclaim that power, for indeed humans need some authority to bow down to. Now see what you did next, and all again in the name of freedom. I tell you that man has no more tormenting care than to find someone to whom he can hand over as quickly as possible that gift of freedom with which the miserable creature is born. But he alone can take over the freedom of man who appeases the conscience. With bread you were given an indisputable banner. Give man bread and he will bow down to you, for there is nothing more indisputable than bread. But if at the same time someone else takes over his conscience, oh, then he will even throw down your bread and follow him who has seduced his conscience. In this you were right, for the mystery of man's being is not only in living, but in what one lives for. Without a firm idea of what he lives for, man will not consent to live and will sooner destroy himself than remain on earth, even if there is bread all around him. That is so, but what came of it? Instead of taking over men's freedom, you increased it still more. Did you forget that peace and even death are dearer to man than free choice in the knowledge of good and evil? There is nothing more seductive for man than the freedom of his conscience, but there is nothing more tormenting either. And so instead of a firm foundation for appeasing human conscience once and for all, you chose everything which was unusual, enigmatic, and indefinite. You chose everything that was beyond men's strength, and therefore acted as if you did not love them at all. And who did this? He who came to give his life for them. Instead of taking over men's freedom, you increased it and forever burdened the kingdom of the human soul with its torments. You desired the free love of man, that he should follow you freely, seduced and captivated by you. Instead of the firm ancient law, man had henceforth to decide for himself, with a free heart, what is good and what is evil, having only your image before him as a guide. But it did not occur to you that he would eventually reject and dispute even your image and the truth if it was oppressed by so terrible a burden as freedom of choice. So this is very much Ivan's philosophy that man is essentially not able to decide for himself what is good and what is evil, and this was also the burden that Nietzsche saw. If God is dead, then all is essentially permitted. So the Grand Inquisitor accuses Jesus of creating this lofty ideal for humans that they could never live up to, and therefore it was not an act of love, but essentially completely alienated him from humans, and instead created a need for some authoritative institution to take his place as the ruler of mankind.